Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. As you know, it's part of our mission to help you guys. So please send any questions you have to us at info@collegeknowledge.net. Hey everybody, welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kerins. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Michael Leppo, International Admissions Counselor. So Michael, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. First of all, thank you for having me on, and I look forward to sharing my message. Thank you.
Cool. So obviously there's schools all over the world, right? And so you focus on international education, which to me is an interesting, because you're kind of using US-based students to take them to foreign schools. And there's a lot of foreign students that come to US schools. So give me the simple rundown on your outlook on that.
Well, the simple outlook is it took about 17 years of research to get to my sort of a summary. Basically, the U.S. education system is a great system. I've invested, probably over $500,000 to $1 million in the system for my children, and as well as going through it when I was younger. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you and it's interesting to be talking to you guys because I've reviewed what you guys do, and it's very interesting. You guys do exactly what I do to help families sort of budget, find the right school. I'm doing the same thing, not with so much as the wealth management aspect. Mm-hmm. I used to be a financial planner, by the way, in a past life.
Okay.
I got to be a broker during the 88 crash, or I think that was in 88. Yeah. So I tend to blank that out. Anyhow, my wife and I's philosophy has been education. Mm-hmm. So we invested through private school from K through 12, mm-hmm. spent a fortune. Then our kids went to college, private schools, spent a fortune. Very little financial aid, a lot of it coming out of our pocket. So during that time, we were like, okay, this is what we do. This is sort of the game plan. Get them the best education money can buy. So the pandemic hit, mm-hmm. 2020, and that was the game changer right there. So that's sort of that was the impetus for this business that I'm in right now. So what happened, going back, as we all know, you got into remote learning. Mm-hmm. Yep. Remote learning, no more classroom learning. My kids were going into their senior year of college, and part of me was like, Dad, this sucks. I mean, they're looking forward to their senior year. We're doing remote classes. This is ridiculous. So right before the pandemic happened, one of my sons, I have twins, by the way. Okay. One of my sons said, Dad, I'm going to go for a semester, my fall semester of my senior year, I'm going to go to Europe and study. I'm like, fine. How much does it cost? He goes, Dad, it costs like 70% less. I'm like, good, go for it. Sounds good to me. Yeah. So he's there. And that's when the pandemic hit, and he was only there for maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and he had to come home. But mm-hmm. during that time, he had the best time of his life. He says, the academics were fantastic. I'm traveling all over the world. I'm having the best time. So then the pandemic hits, and now we're stuck in limbo saying, okay, what are we going to do with our kids? And they both said, you know what, I'm not going back to school for virtual learning. I have no interest. So one of them took a gap semester, one took a gap year. And during that time is when I started really studying international academics in colleges and universities. So during that time, the other son said to me, you know what, my senior year, I want to go to Spain and study. So I did a ton of research with him, and we discovered that the University of Barcelona, which is in the top 100 globally ranked universities, is about $5,000 a year. Mm-hmm. That's the cost. And it varies depending on what you're studying. So I'm just going to give you some ballpark numbers. But I mean, if you're studying engineering, it might be a little bit higher. but it was $5,000. He went there for the year. We went out to visit him once for a month or so. He fell in love with the school, fell in love with the culture. He said, in essence, I'm never coming back to the U.S. So he did that. And then during that time, I started studying and saying, well, wait a minute. What am I missing here? Why is it that these schools are so much less money than the U.S.? And so I spent a better part of the last year to 18 months studying it. And the reality is, if you go on U.S. World and News Report, global ranking, which is a pretty prestigious organization, that's what I use, you will see in the globally ranked colleges across the world that the schools in Europe match up great to the U.S. They match up great. There's no difference in terms of the education. In many cases, I'll get into it, the education is better. But the difference is the cost is typically from zero, and I'll get into the place at zero, from zero to maybe $10,000 to $20,000 a year, which is in the U.S., as you know, can be $25,000 on up to $70,000. The acceptance rates in Europe are usually 50% to 80% for international students. So the competitive nature, like I remember my kids going to college, trying to apply to school, they're top students, and we're like, geez, guys, Stanford has a 2% acceptance rate. I'm not sure you should apply there. And then, we're looking at acceptance rates from 2% to 18%, stressing out every day about them getting in, taking all these extra SAT courses, everything you could do to possibly get in for the luxury of spending $70,000 a year. And so I found that to be the complete opposite in Europe. And so that's sort of the impetus of why the company was founded. And I'll just give you an instance. For instance, I have someone right now, I'm working with maybe about a dozen people right now, because this company is only about 6 months old. But I have one person who's in Spain right now in medical school for approximately $1,100 a year tuition, not counting their housing. But $1,100, and they're in a top 50 or top 60 medical school. So, without just talking forever on this, but I can tell you this, like, as a parent, the main thing you have to ask yourself and your son or daughter is going away right for you in terms of the emotion? Because you're going to have people that's too far away, my kid's too young, and it's not right for you. Absolutely not right.
Yep.
But maybe it's something where you decide to go for a year and save some money. Or maybe, you know what, you said it's right in terms of the timing is right now, maybe as a freshman or a sophomore, who knows? But then financially, as we all sit down at the kitchen table and crunch those numbers, you need to crunch the numbers very hard and say, okay, where are we going to be coming in on this financial commitment, this investment? Because it is an investment in terms of what you're going to do. So I can give you examples, and I will in a few minutes after some more questions. I'll give you some examples of some colleges comparing, very close comparison in terms of ranking, and the difference in the acceptance rate and the cost will just blow you away. At least it blew me away when I started researching.
So I'm going to reflect back on something you said. Yeah. So and I guess we were talking about the University of Barcelona at the time. The acceptance rate for U.S. students is 50%. What's the acceptance rate for students from Spain?
For U.S. students, acceptance rate is international students is about 70 to 75%.
Okay.
For that particular school, the acceptance rate is about the same for citizens of Spain. It's not much different. Some schools, there's no difference. Some schools, there's a big difference. So it depends. It's going to be school specific and it's going to be country specific in terms of the differences. The main reason why there's a huge difference in cost is almost all these, not all, but a very large percentage of universities in Europe are government-backed, state-backed. They're backed by the government. They're funded by the government. So, like, for instance, let me give you one example I'll give you two examples. The number 41 ranked school in the world, according to U.S. World Global Rankings, is University of North Carolina, number 41. Number 48 is the Sorbonne in Paris, France. UNC is approximately $37,000 in tuition and 20% acceptance rate. Very good school. The Sorbonne has admission, cost is zero, I'll say that again, 0 with an acceptance rate of 100%. Like, how is that possible? That's what they have. I have someone I'm working with right now. That's what we're looking at. So if your child is speaking French and listening to this, and they're fluent in French, the Sorbonne could probably be a pretty good option for you. Okay? So I'll summarize the countries this way. To give you some ballpark numbers and you can ask some more questions. If your child speaks French, German, Italian, or Spanish, those 4 countries, you're going to be looking at acceptance rates of between 50 to, in France, 100%, but 50 to like 80% in general is your acceptance rate. And your cost is going to be on average 5 to 10,000 in tuition. That's your average. And you're going to find, if you go through the list, you're going to find lots of schools in the top 200. Lots. So if you have a son or daughter who's a really good student, there's some great options. If they don't speak these foreign languages and they just speak, let's say, English, then England is another option. But England is going to be not such a bargain. Still going to be a better price. England's going to be somewhere in the $20,000 to $30,000 a year tuition with an acceptance rate of usually about double what the U.S. is. So it can be anywhere from as low as 10% for Oxford to maybe 30 or 40% for some of the better schools. You're still going to have a better chance getting in than you would in the U.S. as an international student, and you'd probably still be paying close to half the tuition price.
Got it.
So the savings isn't as great, but it's still pretty good savings.
So I want to dial in on the government funded institutions for a second, where the cost is 0. So one of my big issues in life is I'm paying for my kids' education so that they learn, not so that they get force fed whatever is being told to be force fed to them. So to me, the moment a government says, hey, education's free, come to our institution, I'm skeptical, right off the bat. And I'll add to that, I've spent 20 years researching ranking systems and the way different, I don't know if it's self-serving or if it's, teaching to a rank or trying to earn a rank by acceptance rate requirements and things like that, right? So I don't put a lot of impact into that stuff, because to me it's the right fit socially, academically, and financially that makes sense for families, right? So you can tell me that Harvard's the best school in the country, or Princeton or Stanford or Yale, and I'll say, well, show me the student and I'll tell you if that's the right school for them, period. And so the first issue, and that I want to get some insight on, is if the federal government of any particular country owns, pays for, and manages the institution, how can I be certain that that student is being taught to learn and to grow, as opposed to being fed information?
It's a great question. And by the way, everything you just said is one of the major reasons why I have people contacting me, because that's what the U.S. is doing just right now. They're force feeding, pardon me, and I don't want to get too political, they're force feeding the CRT garbage, in my opinion, down to people's throats. I don't see any place for that in education, but putting that aside, what we do in the U.S., very simple. And this is going to be something that you probably don't know about. And to me, this was the game changer.
Okay.
In the U.S., back when I was a kid going to college, I studied management. My first 2 years, I had to study liberal art courses. I took sociology, archaeology. I studied mummies. I studied all these things I had zero interest in. I had to spend 2 years of my life reading books on things I had no interest at all. In the U.S., you do the same thing still. It's still the same system. If you're in a liberal arts school, you're spending 2 years taking these courses. My kids just went through it. They spent 2 years studying some of the things they had to study. I was like, you got to be kidding me. But they did that. In Europe, when you go to college at 18 years old, if you want to become a doctor, day number 1, you're taking courses. You're in medical school, by the way. 18 years old, you're in medical school. You don't have to do an undergrad for 4 years. You start right away studying medicine. That's the way the system is set up. In terms of these government funded, no different than in the U.S., where you have these state schools. they could have their agenda, but I can tell you now from personal experience, there is no agenda. You're studying what you're signing up to study.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a bias? Maybe. I haven't uncovered it. It's a really good observation. It's a good question. And it's something obviously I would hate for anyone to have.
Mm-hmm.
But I know right now, many kids who are in U.S. colleges and many who have graduated, and they told me some of the garbage they had to study and the things they had to do to get out of college, opposing their views, was shocking to me. I think the U.S. system of education is going through a major change. And I think for some students, Europe could be an option. I'm not saying a large percent, because families want their kids to go to the same colleges they went to. And, there's a whole thing about being close and visiting them on weekends and all that stuff. I get it. But there is a percentage out there right now for families, I would say, number one, financially, who just, they're thinking, I'm working 3 jobs. What the heck? And also, they might have a son or daughter who was emotionally mature enough to say, you know what, I should look into Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was nervous, I should say, as a parent. I have very mature children. I was nervous from the aspect, hey, they're going. I don't know anyone else. They're going. They went over there, and literally, I've never seen smiles so big on their face.
Mm-hmm.
But that was for them. That might not be for everyone.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So I just have a couple of things, because I know we have a lot of focus on money, and one of the big misconceptions that I talk to parents is the focus of tuition, right? And that's not all that goes into going to college, right? The full cost of attendance is room and board, fees, books, travel expenses. So I know that we've talked about the comparing tuition costs can be very different. What about the cost of living and the travel expenses and the books? What is some of again, I can quote schools that haven't raised their tuition in the past 10 years, but their cost has gone up 5% every year. So I know we've talked a lot about that. How is that different?
All I can say is, speaking from my experience, is that the housing is less in Europe.
Okay.
Housing is less. It gets down to just as in the U.S. Do you want to live by yourself, or do you want to have 4 roommates or 10 roommates? Do you want to share a house? So, but still, overall, I find the housing to be less. Not a big difference, but it's probably 10 or 15% less. Not a huge difference. The cost of food is less in Europe. It's just less. I just spent 6 weeks over there. It's less expensive to eat in Europe. It simply is.
Okay.
In terms of books, they're same. There's no real difference. My son, who was over there for a year, I think his tuition and housing where he was going to school was $74,000. And in Europe, I think we spent $15,000 for the year. And that was with him having his own house, his own apartment. He didn't have any roommates. Mm-hmm. And he sure as heck ate as much as he wanted. So I think we spent $10,000 on room and board with a solo, with no roommates. So I think that stacks up pretty darn well to anything in the U.S. I think it's less, actually. But
so in your particular scenario that you're talking about, your son, I think, goes here for 3 years, takes a year or a semester off, and then continues the education in Europe. Credit transfers, full degree. He's there for a year. Did he have to apply and get into that school individually? Was it a more of a study abroad type environment? How did the whole thing play out there?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's a very good question. People have been studying abroad for years, so this is nothing new. And there are very well-known companies that help you to do that. Those companies, I can tell you from my research, take a pretty good chunk of money for their services. If you do it on your own and you're not using one of these companies, there's definitely some hoops you have to jump through. And that's actually what my company does, because you have really main things that we do. The main thing is identifying the right school for the right fit, for the right culture, for the right kid.
Yep.
As you guys said earlier, putting the cost aside. If it's not the right fit, then you don't go there.
Correct.
You want to make sure you go to the right school. So that's number one. Number two is the hoops you have to go through. So there's an admissions process, and then there's a visa process.
Okay.
The admissions process, you look at their website like, oh, it's pretty straightforward. It isn't. That's why I have a business.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about that first. So it's the same thing with the visa process. So you says, okay, I have to do these 10 steps. Great. Same thing in the US, I have to do these 10 steps. But what happens in Europe, and I'm not really sure why, you tend to have the communication between college and student isn't as good.
Okay.
So sometimes you'll have a week or 2 week delay where there's no response. And then sometimes the response isn't the right answer. Mm-hmm. So it's a little, it can be frustrating. I know it was for us the first time we did it.
Yep.
Second of all, there is an order of documentation that has to be submitted. Depending if it's a foreign country with a foreign language, it all has to be translated, as an example. And then there's something called, and this was the thing that drove me the most crazy in the application process and in the visa process. There is something called an apostille notary. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of that term before?
Nope.
Nobody in the world has heard of this. An apostille notary is, they have this in one person in the state office per state is an apostille notary. What they do is they notarize documents. So you have to have your swear to God. So I can't even tell you how many, thousands of dollars I spent in hours flying and driving to get to the one apostille. I live in Florida right now, to get the one apostille in Tallahassee. And I didn't do it in the right order at first. So it took me like 12 weeks to get this done. Literally, you have to get all your transcripts have to be notarized by a regular notary. No big deal. Go to UPS, $10 stamp.
Yep.
Then you have to go search out this apostille who's going to be in the state office, whatever state you live in. And you have to bring other documents with you at the exact document. And you bring them in, this person, usually they make you wait an hour. They come out, they go, oh, okay, $20, thank you. Without that apostille stamp, you can't get admitted.
Got it.
That's basically these other countries, schools, really having confidence that you are who you are, say you are. So there's no imposter. Mm-hmm. You have to do the same process with the visa.
Okay.
Is go for the apostille, which means you have to go twice.
Got it.
And when you go for your visa, you have to do an FBI background check. In the FBI background check, you have to have that in hand before you go to the apostille and before you go to your consulate. So there's an exact order of doing everything. I did everything out of order initially. We waited 8 weeks for the FBI check. Then we mailed it into the visa. We waited 8 weeks for the visa to tell us, no, it's not apostille.
Got it.
So 16 weeks went by. And then we had to do reverse everything and get a new FBI check because the FBI check we had was stuck with the visa people who wouldn't release it. So there's a process of doing it. But to answer your question, long story short, it can be done. Mm-hmm. It's complicated. That's why I'm here as a consulting company.
Yeah.
But if you can go through it and have the patience, it could be a very big financial payoff.
So just to get back to the question I wanted to understand, and I appreciate I had no idea of any of that, and I love new information. Like this is fantastic. But your son goes for 3 years, doesn't finish a degree at a U.S. school, then goes for a year at a foreign school. Are we getting the same degree? Is it different study? Is it now one completed degree? And did he graduate from A or B?
Graduated from the U.S. school.
Okay.
He got permission from his U.S. school to study abroad.
Got it.
And he studied the same. He was economics. Studied the same thing in Barcelona. He thought the courses in Barcelona were superior.
Got it.
He thought the education was better, and they just transferred credits back and forth. No big deal.
But it was not like a school sanction where you pay school A to do school B's program. It was, hey, you stop here. You deal with school B.
He did this 100% independent on his own. He just needed permission from his school
to get the credits.
Could do it. And we had the privilege of paying like $500 for that permission.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
Which was ridiculous.
Well, hey, it beats the $72,000 you were paying.
Yeah. So then he just took the courses over there, and then when they were finished, those credits just transferred back over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for families that may not go that path, where it's the permission and still get technically the degree, like a more study abroad program, if you're going, full time, that's where you're going to be going to school. What are there any drawbacks to having a degree? from outside of the U.S. to then come back and try and I mean, is there anything where, hey, it's not accredited, you know, you're going to have to get a degree here? Because again, I have clients that are from India, and they basically, when they immigrated here, they go, my degree didn't count. Like it was, so I'm not sure, is that something that exists with some of these schools or certain areas of the world?
It's going to vary. As far as I know, the schools I'm working with, they're all accredited, so there's no issue. But I'm sure there might be some exceptions. But I'll give you, for instance, if you do graduate from any school outside the U.S. with a medical degree, that, as long as it's an accredited university, you're okay. But if you want to practice medicine in the U.S., you have to do two things. You need to get your residencies done in the U.S., and you have to pass the board, the U.S. board.
Yeah.
But your degree is fine.
Yeah.
So if that person, graduated from Spain and they wanted to be a doctor in Spain, they're all set. But to go to the U.S., those are the two steps you have to take to practice in the U.S., which is not a big deal because you have to pass the boards in Spain if you want to be a doctor.
But it's no different than if you're an educated doctor in the U.S., you got to do the same two things. Right. You got to do residency and you got to pass the board. So it's just a standard requirement.
And I had a lengthy discussion with one of my doctors about a year ago on this, who is from Canada, but she did everything in Canada and the USA for her medical degree. And we talked about the pros and cons. And she said, the main thing is passing the boards. That's what you got to do. Yeah. And she said, the medical school, you spend a year studying for the boards, basically. And she just said, your son goes that route. Just make sure he puts time aside to study for the boards. That's really it.
Got it. How about the application process? I mean, we, as far as us focusing and a lot of the help that we try to help our families with on the going to school in the U.S. side is, again, as Dave mentioned, it's that social fit, the academic fit, the financial fit. You miss one of those three, you can severely mess things up moving forward. Right. Yeah. And obviously, we talk about visiting campuses and, hey, if you're looking to go to school in Europe, that's a costly trip to see if you want. Yeah. But also it probably is important because, again, how do you know if it is going to be a social fit if you're there for 2 months and you hate it and you got to leave? So as far as, one, I'll say, how does it fit into the college search process? But then also, what is the application process? Very like, hey, we've got the Common App that can make life a little easy for high school students. What's the application process and kind of building a school list very different from looking at U.S. schools?
If you didn't know, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Elite Collegiate Planning. Make sure to share and tag us.
Honestly, from going through it a lot, I don't think it's much different other than the college visitation part, because that is an issue if you just can't hop for the weekend.
Right.
I recommend that, we do the research to really get to the top 5 or 10 schools in the country, and then they go visit and really be there to see. Also, with some of these countries, you need to pass an international language test if it's in a foreign language. So you can't even go there if you're not fluent or mostly fluent.
Got it.
So that's part of it. And in terms of the Common App, most countries have a Common App, but then just as we have in the U.S., each college tends to have their own 2 or 3 extra steps. So there tends to be a Common App. And the Common App isn't too different than like in the U.S., except that they want, you have to usually write, like, I guess it's not too much different. Like in the U.S., you write an essay in terms of, whatever the essay question is. The essay question in Europe tends to be, what is your motivation to study here? It's much more about your motivation to study here as opposed to answering maybe 2 or 3, esoteric questions that some university might hit you with. So that tends to be is like the motivation letter is a big part of the application. It's just like the U.S. It's a grind. There's some steps you got to go through. Probably out of the 10 steps, like 5 or 6 are just basic things like identification, stuff like that. But then in some of the places, not all, but in some of them, you do have to take an SAT type test. So there could be, depending on the country, like in Spain, for instance, they have they call a test called EBAU, EBAU, and it's not the hardest test in the world, but basically 2 parts of it is knowing about Spanish history and Spanish literature. That's hard if you haven't done it before. So those are 2 tough. The other 2 parts are
could use that in the U.S. Sorry.
Yeah. So when I talk about, low tuition in some of these countries, you gotta go through some hoops. And that's why if you have, I really think parents who have children who can speak a foreign language right now in those 4 different languages I mentioned, Italian, German, Spanish, and French, have a huge advantage to save potentially a lot of money, because those schools are going to be less expensive, and the hoops you have to go through probably won't be as difficult.
Okay.
You already have an understanding of the language.
Yeah. So I got a question that is, I don't know if it's burning in my brain, but it's there. The U.S. kind of global, or the U.S. national sentiment right now is you got to go to college, right? You got to go.
Yeah.
And it's the wrong sentiment. I'm telling you right now, it's the wrong sentiment. College is not for everybody. I'm in the business of college. I endorse higher education. I think it is something that if it's for you, do it, because but you have to have that desire and want and ability to learn and continue your education and be like non-monetarily productive, right? And so when I graduated and I went to a small liberal arts college, which I'm going to argue with you on that point in a minute, but I was done. I wanted to earn money and prove what I could do. When I was going to go to law school, I was like, I'm not doing another 3 years. So on that side, but this sentiment in the U.S. is you got to go to college, and the American dream is your kids do better than you do, and everybody at some point you can't do better than your parents, right? At some point that is you have to try and exist at the level, right? In Europe, specifically the 4 countries you're talking about, is there the same focus on higher ed? Is it like, I know for certain individuals, I'm like, dude, you electrician, you understand circuitry, like you can make more money doing that and have a more satisfactory life than sitting and trying to grind out D's to get a diploma to go to a job where you sit in a cubicle and make phone calls, which you're not going to want to do anyway. So is there a different sentiment in Europe?
The sentiment that I've uncovered is that it's not as competitive. It's not as academically driven crazy. I mean, my kids went through private school and then they finished. From the very beginning to high school, they were in some of the top schools. And let me tell you, the parents were cutthroat.
Mm-hmm. They still are.
These were not nice people. I mean, the jealousy was incredible. My kids happened to be high achievers and doing really well academically and athletically. They were really great athletes. I tell you, people were not that nice to us. There was a lot of jealousy. So I can just tell you from probably 10 or 15 people who my children introduced me to, who are from Spain and from different countries. They're more driven to do something they love. Is what I've found. It's much more focused on that in terms of love and passion, not so much money. That's the main difference. Academically, I've found kids who are every bit as smart, even smarter than the U.S. kids. Matter of fact, an interesting story. The kids, at least this is from one of my sons telling me, the kids who have gone through some of the college study abroad programs from the U.S. colleges.
Yep. So
they have these, every college has a study abroad program. And they have found that literally like every single one of those kids who goes over, almost every one, they go to their party. They don't even go to the study.
Yeah.
Like they like, hey, I'm in Spain, and like they don't even go to class. And so a lot of those kids are just using it as a boondoggle, basically, on their parents' dime.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that says about America, but I'm just saying it's the thing that they do in Europe, which I found to be very attractive, and I learned about it too late because my kids are already pretty much done, is that from the time they're 18, they start studying what they want to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they're almost apprenticing from the very beginning, which I think is a great thing they did, a long time ago, is have an apprentice type thing where you're starting to learn a craft. And just a touch upon liberal arts, I wouldn't knock liberal arts because I think it's a good foundation to help you learn and be familiar with a lot of different things. However, there were a lot of kids at 18 years old, including myself, and including my children, who would have loved to just start focusing on their subject matter.
Well, and I think that point is, if you know, fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the things that, and I'll talk this post-COVID era, which I can't believe we even have to say that as a thing, but it is a thing. It shouldn't. Okay. What we have done is we have created a schizophrenic society of, I don't know whether I want to do that. I don't know if I should do that. I don't know if I should make that decision. Is that a good decision? Is that a bad decision? Should I get vaccinated? Should I not get vaccinated? Should my kids go to school? Should we wear a mask? Should we not? So everybody's in this decision fatigue zone where they don't know what to do anymore. And so more so now than ever before, kids don't know what they want to do. And that's one of our big things that we focus on for listeners, for parents. Like, get in this process early. Start talking about desires early. Don't wait until your kid's 17 and ask them what they want to do and expect them to say, oh, I want to be a veterinarian. Like, you're not going to get those. We have to focus on that stuff. And I'm glad you brought up the apprenticeship style thing that happens over there, because that's what I was aiming for. Like, they're talking about that stuff earlier. They're identifying joys and things earlier and giving people pathways earlier, which I think is what makes the difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had this long conversation with one of my sons the other day where I was talking about apprenticeship, and I was talking about how, you know, like, if you wanted to become a painter a long time ago, you learned from 7 years old on or whatever it was. And he said, this was interesting. So I guess it's still alive and well in a way. He said one of his, who was this? A friend of his who's a teacher, she was telling him that one of her students who's 8 years old, she teaches young kids, he comes into school with $100 bills in his wallet at 8 years old. Well, it turns out his dad is a contractor. I don't know if it's construction or electrician, but he's some type of contractor, and the kid has been doing it since he's been 6 or 7 years old. He's working right now, learning the craft. And so he's making money. And so he's 8 years old and he has money in his wallet, and he is learning that craft at a young age. I think that is, if you have the skill to develop something like that, or being a plumber or an electrician, I think as a parent, you should encourage the heck out of that, because I know so many people, actually all the kids I grew up with, I grew up in a very blue collar place in Massachusetts. Everyone in Massachusetts who I grew up with came from a blue collar background where they were carpenters, they were electricians, they were plumbers. And all those guys learned that craft at a young age. And all of them have made a very steady income their whole life. Not super wealthy, but made a steady income. They're happy as heck. And there's nothing wrong with that. So you have to go back to your point. No, college should absolutely not be for everyone. I mean, it should be something. But I also do believe education, no matter what you're studying, even if it is a subject that isn't the best, you learn from everything. So if you're reading some book or you're taking some class, and you're like, oh my God, this is terrible, I think it still helps you. And so, that was going to be my point to the liberal arts side. So I had a class my freshman year. It was called Why Do We Speak? Was the name of the class. And it was one of these foundational liberal arts, get you to open your mind up kind of classes. And we spent 3 months studying human vocal development and evolution, and why us as a species. And I mean, the end result is because we mentally and physically can speak, is why we do speak, is the ultimate answer you get. So you spend a lot of time to say because we can. But it teaches a thought process, a Socratic dialogue, Socratic method of thinking, of deduction and reasoning and logic. And to me, those are the classes that everybody should take. I want a class that is of non-interest, but a challenge, and you have to think to get to the end of it, right? It's like a logic puzzle at the end of the day. And so I felt that, and I had others that were not as awesome in the, liberal arts environment, but they all forced a thought pattern. And, to your point, going back and CRT, all that crap, I leave it alone. But at the end of the day, the only job of the institution, whether it's here, whether it's there, whether it's anywhere, should be teaching people how to think, not telling them what to think. Right. And that's the part to me where parents listening to this, whether you're choosing Europe, and I think it's a fantastic option for the right kid, if they're mature and they can carry themselves, and that separation is acceptable. And I think that's a fantastic thing to understand and look at. But the idea that you're sending your kids away to be told what to think as opposed to how to think is the problem. And so when you investigate institutions, that's the focus to me, is, are they teaching you to be a better student? Because I'll tell anybody,
You go to school, great. Learn everything in the book. But the moment you graduate is the moment you really start to learn, because then you learn how the world works and how money works and how jobs work and how hierarchies work and how all that stuff that they don't tell you about. They tell you about the academic book stuff. Mm-hmm. World doesn't work via a textbook, right? Unless you're an accountant, then
you know, and that's maybe you make a good point. Maybe that's where the ridiculous amount of money we invested in private school when my kids were younger is paying off, because they're both doing exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And when they were in the private school sector, the classes were 5 or 10 kids or 12 kids. There was no hiding.
Yeah.
Every topic was a discussion. Yeah. And you had to think, and you had to, so I look at them right now, they're able to think on their feet and pivot very quickly.
Yeah.
As opposed to just hiding. Like I went to public school, one of 50 kids, I could hide in the back row and get my C's and not participate. And I didn't know anything. And then when I got to college, I started, realizing, hey, I do want to participate. Yeah. But so that is important. I agree with everything you're saying in that aspect. And students, a student has to decide, and maybe it's hard at 18 years old, and I'm a long way removed from 18 years old, but like, what are you trying to accomplish in life? And these conversations should be starting at a young age. It's very simple. And maybe this isn't the exact answer, but we taught our kids from a very young age. One thing, be a good person, be good to each other, be good to others, treat everybody with respect, and, don't stoop. Just always raise the level. And number 2, I don't care what you do, you're going to give 100% best effort in every single thing you do. No exception. At the end of the day, you succeed, great. You fail, I don't care. 100%. And I'll just give you a quick story. Think back 20 years. So one of my sons came back from we finished the school year. I think he's like in junior high. And he finished the school year. And this one son is, he's really off the charts smart, like, just all A's and stuff like that. But back then in middle school, he wasn't getting A's, he was getting like C's and B's. So he finishes the year, and I say, hey, Sam, I said, what % of effort did you give this year? What %? Overall, he goes, I probably gave about 50%. About 50%. I'm like, you think you could do better next year? He goes, I don't know, Dad. Maybe 50, 60%. I just started laughing. I'm like, he didn't quite get it at that age. And then the other story, which I think was hysterical, was he came back from a history exam, and he had, he still does, he had like a, what do you call it when you can read and just have an instant memory? What's the word? Photographic memory. Yeah. He has a photographic memory. So he knows everything about U.S. history anyone in the world can think of. He comes back from an exam one day. I think he gets like a 70 on this exam. And I'm looking at his answers, and his answers are terrible. I'm like, Sam, you know this answer. And he starts telling me for an hour about the history of each question. Like he knows it inside and out. I said, why didn't you write those answers on the paper? And he goes, Dad, if my teacher doesn't know the answer, why am I going to tell her? I just thought that was hysterical. But anyway, long story short, I think it's very important to have these discussions with your children young, to understand what they want to do, and to make sure they understand what the right fit is, because college obviously is not the right fit for everyone.
Yeah, and the right fit takes time to develop, and I think that's my point: is start early about what you like, what you don't like, with subject matter that's interesting versus disinteresting. It's funny you were talking about that, because last night I coach a travel softball team with my oldest daughters on the team, and we were given a little like a pre-practice thing, and we said, listen, you can't get upset when you fail and you didn't put in the work. Right. There's no room for emotion when you didn't you can't get upset at the result when you didn't put in the work. And so it's the same thing in all of this. And, as a society, and again, post COVID, like we're more protective, we're more sheltering, we're trying to keep people's spirits up and, the mental health issues that are developed out of this whole thing. But reality is there. And the more you try and shelter reality, the worse the outcome is, right? Kids have to fail. They have to understand how to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. There's nothing worse than watching a kid who's never been allowed to fail hit that failure moment and the mental collapse that occurs. So, parents across the board, right? We talk about like freshman and sophomore year is the most impactful year to start these conversations. Like if you're not doing it that early, then you're not having the right conversations. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Great. You don't have to sit them down across the table and say, what do you want to do for the rest of your life, son, daughter? No, it's like, hey, when they're inspired by something, talk about that thing, expand that thing. Hey, we learned this cool concept in math the other day. Hey, well, check it out. Here's how I know people use that. Here's how that can, parlay into something. My daughter in 5th grade yesterday had to do an interview with me. She went to my wife first. This is classic. She has to interview one of her parents on math and how they use math in their life. She goes to my wife writes legal documents and legal contracts for a drug corporation and the DEA. Right. And so she goes, Mom, how do you use math? And she goes, I don't. And she's like, all right, I'll ask Dad. So she comes into me and she goes, Dad, do you use math? And I said, well, every day of every minute I'm using math in whether it's the finance side, whether it's the admission side, whether it's the running a business side, there's math and everything. And we continue that conversation. But the idea here is when your kid finds an interest, whether it's a science, and this is the piece that I want to really explain. If there is an individual subject matter in science, like say you're studying earth sciences and your child is just enamored with atmosphere, ding, ding, ding. Because when they get to college, you can study just atmosphere. You don't have to, you can, it's like the engineering thing. Your kid likes building stuff. Okay, well, structural engineer. You don't have to be a nuclear engineer if you like constructing things, right? So the subject matter, the more you know, the more refined it gets at the top. So pay attention to those little subject matters that they're interested in, because that really tells a better story. And that's a better conversation to have than, oh, so you like science? No, no, you like the atmosphere. Okay, tell me why. So yeah, just my opinion on that.
Well, it's just to give you one quick story. As a parent, as you know, you have 1,000 stories about your kids. You can go on and on that are very interesting to you, but maybe nobody else.
Yeah, true. Sorry if that's the case for those ones.
I'll just give you one story, which you got me thinking, is we had a thing growing up, free fun versus prepackaged fun. Disney is prepackaged fun. Everything else is, create your own fun. And we found that creating your own fun is a much better way to teach and a much better way to live life.
100%.
So one of the things I've done thousands, but I'll only tell you one. One of the things I did with my children when they were very young, and we did it for years, is I'd go to the junk drawer in the kitchen. The junk drawer always has paper clips and, whatever's in there, elastic. And I would dump it on the coffee table. I'd separate it into 3 groups. I'd say, guys, we have 15 minutes. Create. What can you build? And sometimes we'd use a theme. Sometimes it'd be no theme. And we'd have 15 minutes, and they would try to create whatever they could out of their junk, and I would. And I could see at a very young age, what ability they had in terms of creative thinking, but also, it was an incredible time. And so when we go back and talk, and I have a very great relationship with my kids, they talk about that as something they love doing. And, back in I used to watch the what's it called, the cooking channel. Not the cooking channel, but one of those cooking channels they have on TV, and they have it's called Chopped. The show called Chopped, where they're cooking and they get chopped. So what we do, we had our own chop competitions in our house constantly. We'd have I'd pull 30 things out of the cabinet. I'd say, you guys got a half hour. Who can make the best dessert tonight? And I do it with my wife and the kids, and we'd do chopped dessert night. Mm-hmm. And we'd do stuff like that. We did chopped candy night and chopped entree night and appetizer night. I always got last place, but we would do these things. And it was just great ways of building their abilities to think, to socialize, to create. Yeah. And the ability to create is crucial. It is crucial. So it's not just out of a textbook.
Yeah,
it's the ability to think on your feet and to create, which is so important.
And I think there's a connection there too to being able to go study abroad, right? When you have that independence and that ability to think and that critical thinking, that all of a sudden you're comfortable in your own shoes, you're comfortable in your own brain. You know that you can maneuver, you can pivot, you can shift, you can do. That's so important. God, it's important. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was. Because I do have one more question before.
Yeah, because we got to wrap up.
I was just joking about, I didn't tell a story about my kids yet, so I'm going to jump in here. But it was just funny how you were saying make your own fun. So I very recently, one of my jobs here is, training and some of the new sales guys. And one of the things that I'm, have taught, and I was taught over the years, is ask questions and ask good questions. And when someone asks you a question, we'll answer it with a question to make sure you clearly understand what they want to know, what they're asking you. So we bought a new car, and the old car had the TV in it. The new car doesn't. So my kids literally are like, what are we going to do on car rides now? I said, oh, it's all right. We'll play the question game. They're like, what's that? I said, well, what do you think it is? And they're like, I guess we ask questions. And right away, it was like, yes, the way you lose, as soon as you say something that's not a question, you're out. And we just keep going around. My wife is now driven insane because when she asks my kids a question, they ask a clarifying question. It is absolutely fantastic. They now, when you say, hey, Joe, what are you doing? Like to my youngest son, Joey, what are you doing? Well, I was right over here, but what do you need me for? It's not just, I'm here. No, they all are now learning to communicate. They're now 10, 8, and 5. And my 3 kids ask better clarifying questions than I do. It is amazing. I said, all right, I'm just going to get them built for sales now. It's just by doing it, but it's just funny. Well, just to jump in, I don't know if you know my background, but for 35 years, I've been the senior VP of sales and marketing organizations, my own consulting company. I've trained over 22,000 people on sales, performance, peak performance. I've written 15 books on sales and leadership. My whole life is sales. Uh-huh. And so the question game was so funny because I trained my kids from the time they were like a year old on asking high gain, open-ended questions, who, what, where, why, when, and how. Every question, it starts with that because you want to get people talking. Yeah. And if there's an objection, you ask a clarifying question. Mm-hmm. And it's all open-ended questions. And I've done training courses and all sorts of things, but it's so funny because I see them now in the business world. Yeah. And they're kicking ass because they ask great questions. And it's so exciting for me because everything someone says, like one of my sons is negotiating right now salary. And so the person asked him yesterday about, this is the base. And he says, well, tell me about that base. How did you come up with this number? He played it so beautifully. At the end, she's like, well, no, the base is negotiable. And it was so great because he went from a fixed number and basically in about 5 minutes of conversation, she was, well, the number she came up with, well, it could be another 25%. And I was like, that's the power of asking questions. Yeah, I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. That's awesome.
All right. So my last question today, we've talked a lot about, benefits, especially a cost benefit with traveling, or studying abroad. But as with anything, I'm sure there's also downsides. Now, if families are interested in outside of just the glaring one, which is you're halfway around the world, you're not a 3-hour car drive, which I'm sure is there. What are some of the other, I'll say, cons, and not necessarily that they're cons, but parents need to be aware of, like the ability, again, some other families I've talked with from international, the ability to change your major, transferring schools, are there things that families need to be aware of? That's not how the system is over there. You can do that here, but you go to school for accounting. There's no such thing as changing your major. Is that exist? Are those things that parents need to be aware of before they start down that process?
I haven't seen that at all. You can move from major to major. It's not an issue. But in full disclosure, I'm trying to think of some negatives, potentially negatives. So one of them is if your son or daughter is a big time athlete. Mm-hmm. They don't have college athletics like they do in the U.S. Okay. There's no NCAA. You do have club sports or intramural sports. Mm-hmm. But if your son or daughter is a Division I athlete and they, scholarship and all that stuff, then you don't want to go to Europe. You're not going to be playing at that level. Got it. So to me, that was because both my kids were really good athletes. I'm like, what's going to happen? So they both were able to find intramural or club teams that played at a very high level. Yeah. So there really wasn't any downside. But the good thing is they weren't practicing 7 days a week. Yeah. And the competition was still very good, but it wasn't
life or
the same thing we're used. It wasn't like there's no March Madness or anything like that.
Got it.
The only other, I'm trying to think of any other negative.
Are the majors as diverse over there as they are here? Okay.
Yeah. Just go, for any of your listeners, go into the U.S. World and News Report global ranking. take any college, any country at choice. Just take a look and you'll see that the colleges have been around for hundreds of years out there. Yeah. These are great institutions, but you have your top ranked to be number 7,000. So just like in the US, number 7,000 might not be that great. Mm-hmm. But I got to tell you, I have a lot of experience right now. I've been doing a lot right now with some people in France and in Spain. Those seem to be the two places I'm doing the most right now. I can't find the holes. Mm-hmm. I can't find the holes because I'm just like you. I want to know what's the downside.
Yeah. And are there things like Greek life and stuff like that over there? Is it?
That's the other thing I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think they have dormers. I don't think they have a fraternity.
Okay.
They don't have that. Those are the two things. Thank you. It's the sports and the fraternity sorority system. They don't have those things. Those are definitely missing.
Got it.
So
but and like co-ops exist and like work opportunities, all that stuff is there.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. You can find those. And by the way, being a U.S. citizen internationally carries huge cachet.
Yeah.
You're looked up to, and opportunities come your way.
Yeah.
So we still our country still has brand recognition.
Well, and that actually economic power is probably the bigger recognition there, right?
Yeah, and that still opens doors. Yep. And also the final point, which is kind of goes without saying, if you go international, you're studying in one of these countries, you need to be fluent in another language or get better. And both my kids weren't fluent, but they were like 80%. That's only going to help you in your career to get to speak a foreign language. And then, one of my kids, he's been to like 30 or 40 countries traveling abroad. That's only going to help you as well because you build up that knowledge base from all these countries. So I just think there's a lot of positives to be culturally immersed internationally with all that potential information, as opposed to, let's say, you're in your little town of 700 people or whatever it is where you're studying.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of positives to that because you're not going to be sheltered. Yeah. And, a lot of the things you were talking about before is our country, our civilization is just sheltering kids. And you're like, everybody gets a participation trophy and all this garbage, which is so detrimental.
You're striking my bones right now. You're spot on.
I believe you win, you lose. That's my belief. And if you lose, that's okay because you learn from it. That's actually a good thing.
Yeah, we say in our house, you either win or you learn. Right.
Win or learn. Yeah, that's what I don't see how getting a trophy for striking out 29 times I don't see it.
That's another podcast episode that I'll bring you back for. But Michael, this has been a fantastic conversation. If families listening want to get in touch with you and talk about international opportunities, how do they do that?
Yeah, there's three different ways. You can just go to my personal Gmail, michael.leppo@gmail.com. The business number is 609-510-2000. Or they can, the email for the business is marketing@internationaladmissionscounselors.com. I know it's a long title, but that's what it is.
All good stuff. Great. Love it. Really appreciate the conversation. I'd love to chat more about this as you continue to grow the repertoire and understand. And because to me, it's all trying to understand how the college universe works on our side. So thanks for coming on, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. This has been College Knowledge.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, great stuff, man. Yeah. Love it.
Thanks for listening to the College Knowledge Podcast with your hosts, Dave Kozak and Joe Kerins. We hope you enjoyed this week's exploration of higher education, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. That's all for this episode. See you next time.